Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
Our dogs honestly saved our lives this night and deserve some recognition. So this whole thing happened when I was maybe 12. I am nearly 17 now. Lee and my sister, who was 14 or 15 at the time, were staying home alone while our parents were at my little brother's hockey game. We lived in a fairly safe neighborhood. Hardly anything ever happened, everybody knew everybody, and almost everyone got along well and liked each other. So we felt safe as we didn't have a reason not to. Our front door was locked. Our back door was locked, but our side door didn't lock. It was broken, but no one ever used it anyway, so my dad hadn't gotten around to fixing it. Lee and my sister were in the living room watching television and doing homework when we heard the fence outside of our house making some noise. It sounded like someone had jumped over the fence. So my sister looked through the blinds and sure enough someone had jumped the fence. Two people actually. They were dressed in mostly black with like a hospital mask over their faces. We freaked out and hid in between the couches in the living room. When we heard the front door knob wiggle, of course it was locked so it didn't open, but we knew whoever it was would go to the side door next and that one would open. In that moment I was the most terrified I had ever been. But once the door handle started jiggling loud enough, my dogs had woken up. At the time I had a Tosa and a Rottweiler. Once one started barking, so did the other one, and eventually it was just pure chaos. That's when we heard them scream they got dogs, then we heard the fence make the same noise, as if someone jumped over it again. Later that night a local gas station near my house got robbed by two armed men, and the news reports showed the same people we had seen, same outfits and everything, except this time we got to see their faces. Our dogs truly may have saved our lives that night. The funny thing is, our dogs are the biggest lovers. They may be loud and bark, but they wouldn't bite or attack anybody. This is the one time I'm very glad that these dogs breeds are associated with being quote scary and aggressive, because clearly they scared off whoever wanted to break in that night. So me, a 28-year-old woman, and my husband recently relocated to a small town for work. The area is known to have high criminal activity and a lot of homeless people, but I am not usually scared or paranoid. I decided to go thrifting, hoping to find a baby safety gate. Once I got to the store and parked, there was no one in the parking lot. I went in. Right behind me entered a large, well-dressed male that was persistently eyeing me head to heels. At first I didn't think much of it and I just went on checking the book section they had. After a while I started to feel as if someone is hovering around me. I started to feel a bit anxious because every time I would look behind me, the guy would be standing way too close to me, literally not looking at any books, just pacing around, and would look to the ground to avoid my stance. I am not a shy girl. I know how to stand up for myself when needed, and I know better than to make a predator feel like he is intimidating me. I turned around and gave him a screw-off look and went to the other side of the store to shop, and right behind me followed the creepy guy. I tried not to mind him and continued looking through clothes, vases, and decorations, and wherever I would go he would follow in a very creepy way, keeping himself as close as he could be to me. 40 minutes in, the employees noticed that the guy wasn't interested in anything and they asked him if he was okay and if he needed anything specific. He said no and brushed them off with a story. He was persistently following me and he tried to corner me in an unseen part of the store. I looked him in the eye with a "don't mess with me" look until he broke eye contact, and I turned away and paced as fast as I could. Of course he was right behind me, pacing as fast as I was. I messaged my husband my location and sent him the description of the guy and told him what was happening. He told me to get out of there safely as fast as I could and call the police if needed. I then asked the employees if they had any gates around. He answered me from behind before they even had the chance to open their mouths. Then the employee took me to show me what they had available. Of course he followed us. I then went to pay for my stuff and asked the guy working there to walk me to my car because I was just not feeling safe and I was sure that the creepy guy would try to hurt me or try to steal from me. My first thought was he saw me park outside and ran after me, hoping to jump me and steal from me. I drive a fancy 2023 model truck. My husband believes that he just wanted to hit on me but didn't know how. I've lived in 3 different continents and had my share of deprived creeps and psychopaths, but I am not sure what to think of this. Not sure if I overreacted. My husband thinks I did, but I still cannot understand what his intentions were, hoping to get closure from this. I go a log box near my home most nights. I live in a safe suburban neighborhood. It's a huge grid of residential streets, in the middle of which is a big open park type area, larger than 2 football fields, that's next to a school. Last night, around midnight, I was walking on the sidewalk next to the park, listening to a podcast, slowly making my way to the school. The school has a big, well-lit parking lot in front, with 2 entrances/exits about 25 yards apart. As I neared the school, I noticed a car in the parking lot with its headlights pointed toward the street. This is unusual for this time of night, especially on a weekday. Maybe it's a cop, I thought. I got closer and saw that it was a beat-up red truck. It had started slowly and aimlessly driving around the lot. As I passed the first entrance, the truck seemed to notice me and stop. I got halfway to the second entrance when the truck rushed toward it. I assumed the driver wanted to pull out before he had to wait for me to cross. No, the truck just sat there. I leaned as I approached. I got to the entrance and saw that the truck was occupied by 4 men. I motioned to the driver to go ahead, but while looking straight forward, he just motioned with his hands for me to cross. At the same time, I noticed a guy in the backseat staring at me menacingly. I crossed in front of the truck, expecting the driver to blow the horn or rev the engine basically to screw with me. He didn't. They just sat there watching me. I continued down the road, and as I was turning right onto another street, the truck exited the lot, turning in the opposite direction. Just a strange encounter, I thought. A few minutes passed, and I saw the same truck approaching me. Getting to me would have required circling the park and traveling down 3 additional streets, and to do it so quickly would have required serious speeding. The truck slowed as it approached, almost stopping as it got to me. The occupants stared daggers at me as they passed. It felt like they wanted to do something but lost their nerve. Now I'm a little freaked out. I'm not a paranoid person, so I started rationalizing their behavior. I told myself they're just cruising around, enjoying some weed before going home for the night. That wouldn't have been out of the ordinary for my friends and me in high school. These guys looked too old for this, though. My gut insisted something was wrong. Out of an abundance of caution, I walked a little down the street and crouched behind a big oak tree surrounded by bushes on some random person's property. I know this is inappropriate and possibly dangerous. I hope the homeowner wasn't watching me from his Ring doorbell as I lurked on his property. For a couple of minutes, I crouched there before I saw headlights. It was just the neighbor from across the street arriving home. He entered his house, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I actually felt pretty embarrassed. Just as I was about to stand up, I heard the rattling of an engine and saw headlights slowly moving down the street. It's the red truck. I'm sure I imagined it, but I thought I heard its brakes squeal right before my hiding spot. I wondered why this truck was apparently speeding to get to me and slowing when it arrived. It didn't seem like chance, and I'm now convinced this truck is seeking me out. I started running as soon as the brake lights disappeared. I'm a little more than half a mile from home, and I'm not taking any chances. As I turned onto the street that intersects with mine, I saw headlights and heard a familiar engine rattle. I can't say with certainty that it was the red truck, but I immediately turned around and ran to the side of another random house. Making things more ominous was the spooky music and witch's cackle coming from the Halloween decorations next door. I waited another minute, making sure the red truck didn't pass, and ran the rest of the way home. I walked in out of breath, and my wife asked me what happened. She scolded me for walking so late at night after I told her the story. The middle-aged woman is strong with her, so she immediately pulled up the Nextdoor app. Apparently, there have been several reports of car break-ins in our area attributed to men in a red truck. It's probably not connected, and I was almost certainly being dramatic. I doubt anything would have happened if I'd encountered the red truck again. Still, I'm glad I did it. Please bear with me as this story is quite lengthy, but I hope you find it worth the read. I'd also like to emphasize that I've purposefully left out identifying details to protect the privacy and respect the memory of the victims involved. If you happen to know the real-life events behind this story, I ask for your discretion and understanding, as the purpose of sharing it is for my own catharsis and reflection. Thank you for your consideration and respect for the victims. In the heart of that Southern University town, where the campus and the local community intertwined, I embarked on a fateful night that would haunt my memory for years to come. I was just 20, a junior in college, eager to savor the newfound thrill of going out to bars with friends who, like me, possess fake identifications. The atmosphere was charged with youthful energy, and I reveled in the attention from guys who were more than willing to buy me drinks. It was my first taste of such attention, and I played it up, basking in the newfound allure of adulthood. As I headed to the bar to procure another round of drinks for my friends, I encountered Jay, a man who would cast a sinister shadow over that night. He was a townie, one of those locals we often referred to with a mix of condescension and pity. In this college-centric universe, many townies were drawn to the bars, their troubled lives intersecting with the students' carefree world. Jay didn't seem particularly ominous at first. He struck up a conversation with me, bought me a drink, and we engaged in a seemingly pleasant exchange. But as the night wore on, he grew increasingly agitated when I declined to give him my number. His mood shifted, and he began making a scene, prompting my friends to intervene and extricate me from his presence. Yet, even as we distanced ourselves from him, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that his predatory gaze never wavered. It wasn't the gaze of someone interested in romance, it was a chilling, haunting stare. Desperate to escape his unsettling presence, I decided to join the guy I was seeing at the time, who was at a bar just across from ours. These bars were mere feet apart in a pedestrian mall, so I thought nothing of going there alone. My car was parked conveniently nearby, and I took refuge inside to charge my phone for a few minutes before heading to meet my friends. But as I sat there, I heard the car door open. It was Jay. This stranger had followed me from the first bar and now sat in my car as if we were old friends, oblivious to the terror he instilled in me. I was paralyzed with fear, unsure of how to react. He seemed alarmingly normal, completely unaware of the distress he was causing. It was a situation that grew scarier by the second as I realized the gravity of the peril I was in. Thankfully, within what felt like an eternity, but was probably just a couple of minutes, the guy I was seeing flung open the car door and asked if I was okay. Relief washed over me as I explained what had just transpired through tears, my voice trembling with fear. He had arrived at just the right moment, a guardian angel in the darkness. His presence sent Jay packing like a child who had been caught misbehaving. If it weren't for his intervention, who knows where I would be now, and what sinister plans Jay might have had in mind. A year later, it resurfaced in the most chilling manner possible. A fellow junior, Holly, went missing, sending shockwaves through the campus and making national headlines. Search teams scoured the area, and the nation held its breath as they discovered security footage of her leaving a bar, followed by a man, Jay. The search ultimately ended in tragedy as Holly's lifeless body was found. The police investigation led to the capture of her killer, and it sent shockwaves through the university community. Jay had not only taken Holly's life, but had also been responsible for the deaths of 2 other girls, making him a serial killer. Witness reports, news articles from those who last saw Holly say she was telling Jay, "I will not get in the car with you." Jay is currently serving 4 separate life sentences. I had never shared this haunting experience with anyone beyond my closest friends and husband, fearing judgment and repercussions from my conservative upbringing. But now, returning to that town, the memories resurfaced with a vengeance. Some scars never truly fade, and the night when I narrowly escaped the clutches of a killer named Jay remains etched in my memory as a chilly reminder of the darkness that can lurk in even the most seemingly ordinary places. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. This has been ongoing and I can't decide if I'm overreacting or not. I've worked at my job for 6 years, very small manufacturing plant. All that time we've had the same janitor come in the afternoons. When I was first hired, he'd come in my office to clean and I always said hello and thanked him, but he never said a single word back. I heard him speak to my boss as normal as anyone once or twice, but never to me. That got uncomfortable, so I stopped saying anything and I started leaving my office when he'd arrive. Eventually, I didn't need to leave my office because he changed his routine and did mine when I was gone for the day. The past year, whenever I walk past him and get out of view, he lets out this cackle. It's weird, uncomfortable, and puts me on edge. Others have heard him do this and have pointed out he's only doing it when I go by. There are times I've avoided getting something I needed because he's cleaning in the space I need to get it from. Last week I was leaving work and my coworker caught him peeking around the corner of a narrow hallway near the exit, so she stopped and waited for me. As I approached where she was and happened to look down that hallway, he's standing still in the middle of it in the dark, staring in our direction. I told my boss about the hallway and the other laughing incidents. He said he'd run a background check to see about him and to make sure I'm not the last to leave the building anymore, not that I ever was. I told him I didn't feel threatened, but that these instances are odd and only happening to me, so it's not comfortable. Am I overreacting? My gut says something is off. For context, I'm a man in my late 30s and was 18 at the time of this story. 20-something years ago this month I moved to London to attend music college. Most of my other friends were still doing their A-levels, but I sacked those off in favor of an opportunity to study drums and percussion, which I'd already been teaching myself for 10 years at that point in the big city, and to escape my sucky rural hometown. It was the last day of the last term of our year-long course, so everyone ended up at the pub to celebrate. It was a fairly rough pub, but the nearest one to our college, so it was always a weird mix of shifty locals and annoying music students, myself included, and this night was no different. Everyone was doing karaoke, which at the time I was just too awkward to take part in, particularly in front of a pub full of people. I was getting bored and wanted to leave, but was staying with one of my fellow drummer friends who lived a lot closer to the pub than I did. Things were starting to wind down, so I told my friend I'd meet him outside once he'd finished making out with one of the vocal students. I went and stood outside on the street next to the pub by some fencing, behind which were some garages of nearby council flats. I changed chain smoked a few Marlboro Reds knowing my friend was going to take his sweet time. As I was standing there, I saw a shifty looking guy in a hoodie with chin-length dreadlocks approaching from afar. As he passed me, we made brief eye contact, but I thought nothing of it and continued smoking. A few minutes passed and I heard what sounded like some sort of rustling or footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw the same guy on the other side of the fencing. He was walking towards the garages but kept looking up at me. This felt a little strange, but I just assumed he was just a weird guy who lived at one of the flats, so I turned around again and continued smoking. After a few minutes, I was a little curious as it had sounded like the guy's footsteps had stopped quite abruptly shortly after I turned back around, so I looked around again to check if he was still there. To my absolute bewilderment, I saw the guy now sort of crumpled in a pile on the floor with his back against one of the garages, trousers round his ankles, his thing in hand, just going ham on himself whilst giving me the most intense eye contact. I swung back around in shock, completely unable to process what I'd just seen. I was frozen and had no idea what to do. About 20 seconds passed and I heard the zip of his fly, then the sound of footsteps growing louder and I knew he was approaching me. The footsteps stopped. "Excuse me," the guy said at a soft and nervous sounding tone. I turned around. "Yeah, what? You're not gay, are you?" No," the guy, almost blushing, says. "Oh my god, I'm so sorry," and hurriedly walks away. For years I used to retell this anecdote as a funny sort of "oh my god, that's outrageous" story. It didn't really dawn on me for a long time how messed up that event was, I think in part due to when it happened, early 2002, and the fact I'm a man, so most people wouldn't immediately think of me as someone who would get flashed at or harassed or be exposed to. It was only in the last 5 years or so, with the increased awareness of that kind of behavior, I started to reframe it a little. Context: I conduct bystander intervention trainings and have an excellent sense of when I feel uncomfortable versus unsafe. I have trained in conflict escalation techniques. I've also taken a self-defense course and feel comfortable using those skills if necessary. I'm a woman in my mid-20s, but usually people guess my age around 16 to 18. Event: I had already been in Marshalls for a while, and having finished trying on clothes, I decided to check the men's section for my partner before heading out to run my next errand. While looking through the racks, I began to notice that someone was following me through the racks and watching me closely. A young man, probably aged 18 to 21, would walk down the aisle a little ways behind me, then pass by me very closely, much more closely than the aisle width required. After having this happen 2 or 3 times, I made eye contact with him after he made his pass, and he said sorry. I first assumed that he was interested in taking my purse and or taking something out of my purse, so I kept a closer hand on my crossbody bag. After having said sorry, he kept his distance for a few minutes, and I continued browsing. However, he shortly approached me and held out a piece of printer paper with an image of his driver's license, a vertical under 21 license, and asked me, "I just got my license photo taken, do you think it's a good picture?" I said, "Yeah, it's a perfectly good photo," and moved on. At this point, I was getting a little weirded out, but there were plenty of other people in the men's section, so I wasn't particularly concerned yet. Shortly after, as I approached the end of the men's section, he approached again and asked, "Can I give you a hug?" I responded, "No, thank you." He asked, "Why not?" And I responded, "I don't really feel like giving a hug now, thanks." Then he said, "I'm not a danger to you." I responded, "I know, I'm just not interested in giving someone I don't know a hug." He went away to another part of the men's section again after this, and I finished looking through the rack. At this point, I was starting to feel deeply uneasy, but continued to play it cool in order to not escalate the situation. While I was browsing the last rack, he came back again and asked, "Can I follow you around while you shop?" I responded, "No, thank you, I prefer to shop alone." He responded with his usual "why?" and I let him know again that I prefer to shop alone. He left again, and at this point I was so thoroughly freaked out that once I made sure he was walking away from me and not looking at where I was going, I left the store and exited onto the strip. He did not follow me, and I entered the neighboring Ross to wait things out. I immediately texted my partner, who was at a conference hosted at one of the casinos. So my question is, what happened here? My partner and I have a couple of theories, but I'd love to hear if anyone else has experienced something like this or knows of other experiences like this, especially the showing the license thing. We can't really figure out what that was for. Theory 1, bad pickup artist. The game tells men that they should use props to try to pick up women. Was this just a really bad attempt at trying to hit on me? Theory 2, I almost got abducted. Israel Keys attempted to abduct a woman from a Marshalls in the late 90s using a similar technique, staring at her for a long time, then asking her how old she thought he was. Kelsey Smith was abducted and murdered after being followed down the aisles in a Target, then followed out to her car. These instances feel eerily similar to what I experienced experienced, and during the encounter, my unsafe alarm bells were definitely going off. I was ready to fight this man and the marshals if necessary. I don't believe trafficking was at play, since trafficking rarely involves getting snatched off the street by a random person. However, I'm not entirely closed off to that idea either. Please check out Polaris Project for more information about trafficking. I, a 29-year-old woman, have been hiking at a wooded trail near my house for about 3 years now, and it's my favorite trail due to the beautiful waterfalls and meadows, but had several creepy encounters over the years. Luckily, I always hike with my 90-pound Bernese, Baker. He's the sweetest boy, but will protect me. First encounter was 3 years ago in the winter when I was walking up a hill and Baker starts growling unlike I've ever heard. I look around and realize there's a man in the shadow of the woods watching us, and when I notice him, he starts walking slowly towards us with his head covered. I said hello as usual, and he didn't respond. I kept walking and got a feeling that I should turn back. When I did, I realized he had turned around on the trail, middle of the hill, so not a common turnaround point, but once he saw me, he walked into the woods and stared out at the valley hugging a tree, so nothing too crazy, but it just felt off. Around the same time a year later, Baker and I are walking on the same trail, and again, Baker starts growling. Usually he is very excited to meet anyone or anything. I realize there appears to be the same man standing off in the shadows watching us, but I figured maybe Baker just scared him, so he was standing away from us, waiting to cross the bridge. Otherwise he easily could have kept walking along the trail instead of waiting for us. They cross the bridge and keep walking. I again get a feeling that I should turn around. When I do, I realize he is behind us, so I had no reason to be waiting for us to cross the bridge. I sit down with Baker by my side and pull out my phone while making it clear I've seen him, not staring, just glancing in his direction. He stops when I turn around, even though I'm off the trail and not in his way, but continues walking after I pull out my phone. I start walking back and find a large stick he had left that had been sharpened with a knife into a spear. I take the spear and continue walking while looking around me the entire time. I know now I should have reported it at this point, but I just convinced myself I was being paranoid. About a year later in the winter, I'm walking along the same path, maybe stupid, but I took a year off and again just convinced myself I was paranoid. It's snowing with the trails mostly empty, and I suddenly see a bunch of trees with frowning faces made out of snow, despite not seeing anyone on the trail for miles. Baker again starts growling at something in the woods that I can't see, so we turn around. I don't report it because I figured it would never be taken seriously. Then today, a few months later, I'm walking along the trail and find a tree with "I see you" written in chalk. I immediately get a weird feeling and turn back and report it to the park rangers and police. Update: I'm working with park rangers to keep an eye out. After sharing in my hiking groups on Facebook, several women have come forward with similar experiences at the same place. One woman was stalked by a man in a full snowsuit in middle of July on this trail. Another was followed all the way to her car with an appearing along the trail watching her from the woods at various points. Update 2: 6 different women have come forward with similar experiences with a similar looking man at the same park. They've all reported it to the rangers. I interviewed with the local news. They reached out to me and it's everywhere. Rangers are not happy with me for sharing with the public, but that's fine with me as everyone has a right to know. Someone whacked off the "I see you" message before the news team could see it. It rained, but not that heavily. 3 separate women messaged me thinking it was the same exact guy. Despite the women not knowing each other, they stated he is unstable and spends most days at this park. His cousin reported him too. I shared his name and photos with the rangers, and apparently the suspect is an old park ranger himself, so we shall see. The suspect apparently loves climbing trees and has a bunch of photos of himself 50 feet in the air, so he's probably up in the trees watching. Update 3: apparently he has a secret spot in these woods where has a chainsaw and gasoline. We reported it to the rangers. Pretty sure having a secret campground in a public park is illegal, with or without a chainsaw, and stalking/intimidation is a form of illegal assault, so there's no reason he can't at least be questioned. My aunt and uncle's house was in a small desert town. They had about 4 acres of land and a good amount of space between neighbors. On the back of their property there was a fenced-in area with a large shed and an old salvage U-Haul moving truck. I was visiting for a couple weeks one summer. My little cousin and I were about 10 and 12 at the time. One morning, we were roaming the property by ourselves. The adults were all out running errands. We ended up walking between the fence and the old moving truck. We were on the passenger side of the truck, walking from the back towards the front. All of a sudden, my cousin just just froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood instantly. He didn't make a noise and just pointed at the side mirror. In the reflection, we could see a man sitting in the driver's seat. His face was caked in dirt and blood. He was moving around quickly, and at one point he ducked out of our view. We instantly turned and sprinted back to the house. We locked all the doors and called the cops and family. We were freaking out, running from room to room, looking out the windows, brandishing baseball bats. The police and family showed up after about 15 to 20 minutes. They searched all over, but never found the man. They found the fence was bent down where he must have climbed over it. There was blood and dirt smeared all over the driver's seat of the truck. He must have been trying to steal it, because the ignition wires were pulled out like he was trying to hot wire it. No explanation for the blood. Nothing happened after that. My cousin and I had nightmares for the next few nights. That's about it. When I was a teenager, me and my friends used to quite frequently go to abandoned buildings of different sorts. This hobby kind of got worn out for me personally, but when I was at my first or second year of university, I noticed a weird, not too big, abandoned building very close to my university. My university is located pretty much downtown. The place we are talking about is very crowded and filled with elite property, stores, and historical buildings. So it was weird seeing the building standing weirdly in some sort of a yard between other buildings. So I grabbed my friends, there were 4 of us, and we decided to check it out. We came there late at night so there would not be more eyes than necessary. It also was winter. We grabbed our tools and broke a lock to one of the entrances, but it was a dead-end small room. It was pretty creepy with a wheelchair standing there. We then found another door to the building. It was locked more heavily. We could not break the lock itself, so we somehow managed to make a big hole in the door so everyone could just climb in there. It was very loud obviously, so after we've done it, we decided to wait a bit before going in just in case someone called the cops on us. After an hour spent at the nearby McDonald's, we, proudly with how we handled that super locked door that seemed to have been open for years, decided to go in. The building felt empty and damaged. There was not much stuff there besides concrete walls and a lot of trash which we thought was old. There was no light in there at all. Every window was locked too. It's creepy to think back on this decision, but the first thing that we decided to do is to go to the attic, all of us. It was more of the same, a lot of trash, some graphitis, and generally nothing too interesting. Then we decided to come back to the floor we started from and check it out properly. While we were for some reason, I guess being kind of creeped out from the atmosphere, just standing in the corridor, which allowed to overview 2 big halls. Both of them were filled with trash. One of us decided to go across the hall. We could see him clearly with a flashlight to check out some sort of shack that was located in those piles of trash in the end of the hall. He looked inside and then rushed back to us very concerned. He said that there is a body inside. We all thought it was a dead person because the building was locked. No way someone was living there somehow. We felt like someone died and somehow nobody cared. This discussion could not be continued because we then actually saw someone coming at us, a mere silhouette. We lost our minds from this and we rushed into our door hole, which was not perfect for anyone to climb through it in such a rush. While we were making it out, this person shouted something angry at us with a rather unsettling voice and was mad at us for breaking the door. We were scared because of how unexpected that was. We were 100% sure there could not be anyone at a locked abandoned building that was out of use for years and partially damaged. We never thought to ourselves that maybe it was not the city that locked it, but someone managed to privatize the locks. The guy himself was creepy too, living in this absolutely dark, full of trash abandoned private hospital. Afterwards we tried to find what it was. It was the best guess. So my boyfriend and I went to Dave and Buster's for a date night the other day and everything was going well, until I passed by this woman closely standing next to a couple. At first I thought she was with them cause she was following them around. She looked like she was in her middle to late 20s. I saw her staring at me from afar, which was weird, but I shrugged it off since I'm Southeast Asian hanging out in a majority white and Hispanic populated area. Then my boyfriend and I walked past her and I felt her tap my arm. So I did what any normal person would do when someone taps their arm. I looked. When I turned my head to look at her, she didn't say anything and continued to stare with a blank look in her eyes. I paid it no mind. I have a pretty heavily tattooed arm, so I thought, you know, maybe she doesn't know social cues and just wanted to touch my tattoo. Yeah, that's it right. A few minutes later, we're still looking for another arcade game to play, and once again I see that same woman, but this time she's not with the couple and she's staring again. My boyfriend and I found a game to play, and as I focused on watching him do his turn, I felt a few quick taps on my arm once again. It was the same lady. This time I decided not to look despite how uneasy I felt, but I did see her pass by. My boyfriend finished his turn on the game and we started looking for another. As we walked around, I started analyzing the strange woman. She didn't have an arcade card and was walking around pretending to press buttons on machines ever so often. She did not go there with anyone. The couple she was by earlier was nowhere to be seen. The look in her eyes kind of reminded me of the people on some type of heavy drug in the downtown part of where I live. Had a creepy and stoic look on her face. As we headed to the ticket prize area, I was talking to my boyfriend about something and felt her tapping my arm again. This time I was fed up. I quietly told my boyfriend, who mind you is a pretty big and buff guy with 2 tattoo arm sleeves. My boyfriend asked me to point her out, so I looked around to find her and saw her staring again. I pointed right at her and my boyfriend was about to walk towards her and she hid behind the arcade machine. We left after that cause I felt pretty uncomfortable, especially since I'm already not about strangers touching me with no consent. Now that I've had time to process everything, I realize how creepy or strange that encounter was. I keep getting reminded of the blank look in her eyes and haven't been able to sleep properly cause of it. So I parked in the car park further away than the other cars this time at work. There was a man in a worky vest, a high visual vest with an old rusty pickup stick. I went shopping with my kids, then as I was walking to my car I had this strange feeling like I shouldn't have parked here because there aren't any people around. I get to my car and notice the man is still in the car park and I just thought maybe he's volunteering or something. He was a fair while away from me, definitely not close to me. I put my kids in the car, put my stuff in the boot, strap my son in the car, and then go to my daughter's side and buckle her in. I usually look around as I'm doing these things to make sure no one sneaks up on me, but I did it with my daughter because her seatbelt is harder to strap, so I was concentrating on that. I heard a car drive past and then people walking past talking, and that's when I stopped midway buckling my daughter in to look around, and that man was in front of my car about 2 to 3 meters away walking over and staring at me. I looked at him and then he put the stuff he had in his rusty pickup stick thing over a waist-high wall, and he also didn't have a bag with him to collect the stuff, and then he turned around and walked away. I'm wondering if those people didn't walk past, could have I been a victim, or is this reaching? Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.